I'm Erin Mullaney. I'm with Cognition Media, and I'm from Boston. Who here wants the Celts to win tonight? There we go. We're actually right over the bridge in Charlestown, and we're actually part of a larger agency called 9Rooftops. So Cognition Media is a branded media practice of 9Rooftops. 9Rooftops is a full integrated agency. We do strategy, creative, digital, experiential, and media. So media is where my expertise lies. I'm an associate media director, and what I really wanted to come and talk about today was not so much privacy in the future, but what strategies are we implementing today to really help with some of the challenges we're seeing in the media marketplace. It complements the other seminars that we've seen so far, because this is going to be a little bit more about prospecting media. So paid advertising and things like that, and how we can really maximize the effectiveness in this evolving landscape. So 9Rooftops does have 9 offices, hence the name. And the Boston office is mostly media and analytics, but now with the remote environment, we're kind of sprinkled throughout the nation. And the 2 topics I really wanted to talk about were incrementality and impact, both of which are extremely important in today's evolving industry. So I'm hoping to go through and talk about not only just the thought process of how we got to these as leading strategic approach, but also some best practices and some tactical examples of where this plays a role. So cue classic contrarian opener. Advertising cannot work and still produce results. Advertising cannot work and still produce results. We've all seen it, but let's do an example to kind of play this out. And we'll use Vegas. All right, so Las Vegas, they're trying to market to people who, maybe haven't planned their Vegas trip, COVID interrupted things like that. They're trying to bring tourists to their destination. And we have a person looking up flights to Vegas. So Vegas decides to do a digital marketing campaign to really target tourists and bring them. Andy here is looking up flights to Vegas, and the algorithm finds him. And they go, oh, look, a contender. That's an age 34 male from the theater market of Scranton. And he's interested in coming to Vegas. So let's toss him an ad. Bloop. And the ad deploys, and that's soon after the search, that maybe even be while he's searching. This is a web banner ad that says, all right, this intender has now been exposed to our advertising, and perhaps we can basically help him get to Vegas. Well, the thing was, Andy's actually Stu, and Stu was already planning to go to Vegas. So while the marketing report says we did it, it was a bachelor trip. He was going either way. It was a non-negotiable. And we have 2 types of results. We have the reported results, which says our ad was viewed by an intender and then thus booked the trip. And then we have the real results, which are there wasn't an incremental conversion in this case. This was an attributed conversion. So that's what we're really looking at when we're talking about incrementality over attribution. Attribution's great. We love to see the results. We love something that's concrete and tangible, but what's even better is incrementality. So yes, Andy/Stu was going to Vegas whether they saw our ad or not. So a portion of your advertising results are not incremental, and that's okay, that's just a fact. However, what we don't want to do is get to a point where we're prioritizing attributable results over the more important incremental results. We get in the habit of showing these numbers because that's why we love digital marketing. It's concrete, it's numerical, it's evidence. You can put that up on a PowerPoint and bring it to your boss or your client, pat yourself on the back, awesome. But some of it needs to be looked at and say, okay, what's the true incrementality here? And it goes both ways. Some of it isn't incremental, and now some of it isn't trackable. So we really just need to treat attributable results for what they are which is a piece of the puzzle. Specifically in digital media, we have a lot of metrics we can look at, and we don't have to put the feather in our cap just at attributable results. So what we're proposing is looking at other data sources as well to really paint a holistic picture. And the fact of the matter is, if you're in the prospecting market of, not necessarily reactive ads, but prospecting intenders, if you're reaching a decent percent of your target audience, the chances are you're going to be reaching people that would have bought your product anyway. So how do you discern which ones are incremental? And then how do you strategize accordingly? So incrementality over attribution is our first strategic approach that's really helping us navigate this changing landscape. So a couple questions are you tracking incrementality? Is there anything in your current reporting method that is keeping a pulse on this part of your advertising results? Because figuring out what portion of your results are likely incremental is key to figure out if it's working. There's a couple different ways to go through these different incrementality tests, and some of them are very, low lift, easy to do, and then some of them get a little bit more expensive or more timely. So we'll talk through a couple of them, and you can see which ones might be easy to implement for your marketing strategy. And number one is just correlating business results. So really trying to be mindful of when you increase advertising dollars, are you seeing attributable results, or are you seeing some sort of lift in the bottom line? So is that sales lift? Is that, maybe you took marketing away from some and did it the other way. You took marketing away from a market and then you saw sales go down. That works too. So really trying to correlate marketing spend with actual bottom line. Where it gets tricky is so much goes in to sales. Marketing can really only dictate so much. Paid marketing can really only dictate so much. You would have a fabulous marketing plan and then a not so great website, and you're on the hook. So people kind of shy away from being correlated with sales. I mean, I don't know how many of us marketers are paid on just commission. So I think that's to be said, but you can't shy away from it. It's really important. The next level, if you will, of testing for incrementality, test and learns. And I've heard this a couple of times throughout the seminars. So this is taking it one step further and not just looking at the results, but really looking at how can I control the situation and using intent to measure, what could happen here. So test one variable and then control for as many others as possible. And that could say, maybe that market test, you notice that you took away media and then you saw sales drop. Well, what if you purposely only put one tactic back? What if you just tried putting Facebook back? And then you can see what the incrementality is of that tactic. And it's not going to be perfect, because if a tornado hits that market, you're not accounting for that. Like, there's different things, variables that you can't control in the test and learn process, but this is a really low lift and easy way to start looking for signs of incrementality. And then we also have here just a sample testing agenda. This was probably similar to the first seminar when Tom showed that stoplight chart. This is very similar. What you do is you think about the tests that you want to run, how much budget you need to do this test. You just want enough budget to get significant results. And then you prioritize it. What do you think is going to be the most important to learn, the most impactful? Start there, and then go through your hypothesis and the results. And you can start keeping track of some of these tests and learns and testing for incrementality, among other things. This could work for, ad concepts and things like that. So a step further, we've correlated business results as a step. We've done some tests and learns. If you're advertising and you have a larger budget, or you have access to some more tools than just, your own brain, vendor platform and third-party studies are a great way to help assess incrementality. So what I really like to run is just on Facebook. If you spend a certain amount of money, you actually get a survey that goes out for people who have been exposed to your ad and who have not been exposed to your ad. And then what that really asks, there's a couple different questions you can ask, but an ad recall question literally just says, hey, did you notice this ad? And if people didn't notice the ad, then how do you expect it to change behavior? So that's kind of a metric that, maybe doesn't get asked enough or isn't looked at enough. I mean, of course, it's a little bit more of an investment here, but it's so important to start to narrow down to say how much of this advertising is really working and how can I hone in on the aspects that are. And then the most ideal scenario is something that we can do now with custom data science models. So if you're looking to say, I want to reduce waste, I want to focus on incrementality, what's a way I can really start to understand what's incremental, or maybe what channel is driving the most incrementality in my media mix? And you can do that with a custom data science model. So that can be completely tailored to your business. You take your data inputs, and it's basically able to control for all the variables except for the ones that you're testing. And with these custom data science models, they're an investment, but then you also get the learning, which as you spend more money, you get that money back because you're investing in a way that's driving incrementality and the bottom line. So those are 4 different ways that you can look for signs of incrementality, and just start thinking about that when you're reporting on results. It is something that we're not going to throw out attributed results by any means, but you do want to get a sense of how much of this is truly incremental. Because when conversion rates are higher than ad recall rates, which we've seen, that's a problem. How can you attribute it to your ads? How is that incremental? So this is just is shifting your mindset of saying, okay, these results are great, but which ones came from the marketing? And the doom and gloom slide about privacy, the time is now, but it's not something that we're looking forward in the future. The privacy issues have been around for a year now, and our team has been in the thick of it. I work on some accounts for the agency, including national and local clients. So Qdoba Mexican Eats, I don't know if anybody likes, yeah. And then, to UMass Memorial Health, which is over in Worcester. And all our clients have seen an impact in terms of audience sizes already dwindling. And we're getting less data points back. And that's what we used to rely on, were those attributable results. So it's an important time to start really considering incrementality, because that has to be the story when the attributable results start to diminish. With that, there's a couple things that have already been in effect. So GDPR, California Privacy Rights Act, iOS opt-out, those are already in effect, and we've been dealing with that. Google Chrome, who knows? They said 2022, now they say 2023, will be cookie-less. But also several bills have been introduced and discussed around this topic in Congress, so it just doesn't end there. And these solutions are supposed to be evergreen and timeless, and not something that are going to have to be rethought of the next time a policy change comes into place. So what's considered personal identifiable information now can continue to evolve. Enter IP addresses, perhaps, or who knows what's next. We just got the email, the Apple's email, what is that? Is now blocking impressions and open rates and things like that. So it can keep coming, and you want a strategy that's going to stand the test of time. So what do we do? Well, it's a little back to basics, but I like to call it back to basics 2.0. Because the basics would probably reach as many people as many times with the amount of budget you have. And then with digital marketing, we really started looking at attributable results. And what we're saying is, what we're really trying to do is behavior change, because that's what's incremental. And when you're looking for behavior change, there's 2 really important concepts. One is planning for impact, and then 2 is prioritizing measurement and research. So to strategize and plan for impact, I have a little experiment. We're going to scroll social media together, and I want you guys to pay attention to the feed and you're gonna see some, we're gonna scroll Instagram. So you're gonna see some owned content, you're gonna see some paid ads, and just pay attention because I'll ask you a couple questions after. And if you're like me and don't have the best eyesight, you can also use this QR code and you can get it up on your personal smartphone. So when you do this, just know it's gonna ask you if you need to download it. You don't need to download it, exit out of that message. And once you have the QR code and you're clicking the link, give me a thumbs up and I can play the same video on the screen and we can watch it together if you're not watching it on your phone. All right, I'll start it on the screen. And we're scrolling. Quiet. All right, so here are the two questions. How many paid ads did you see and what were they of? So for the first question, I do want to caveat, what we just saw was at the average scroll time on social media. 1.7 seconds is how quickly people scroll on their feed. So it probably felt really fast, probably because you couldn't see it was your mom or your family member or whatever, or your friend. But that is actually the average scroll speed right now. So it's quick. If everyone can maybe put up the number of fingers of how many ads they think they saw. Mind you, these are paid ads, not the organic posts. Got 2, 3, 2, 4, 3, okay. And then I guess we just call this one out, and I want everyone to answer, so you don't need the orange box. What were they of?
Something for food.
Lots of Celtics. I think I heard HelloFresh. A dog one. That one was just an organic. See, it's all right. So these were actually the two ads. Whoever said HelloFresh was correct. The Celtics, that was an organic post. But go Celtics. And number 2 was the other ad. And when we're talking about planning for impact, it sounded like, well, let's not assume. Raise your hand if you noticed number 1. Okay, raise your hand if you noticed number 2. Okay, so just by judging the room, a lot less people noticed number 2 and number 1. You can also see in the metrics, and number 1 has 848 likes, and number 2 has 8 likes. Here's the thing with these two ads. They are two different businesses, but they're promoting the same product. So, knowing that and knowing that one was more impactful, that's kind of what we're after. And I figured showing 2 ads would be a good way. The other funny thing about these ads is they cost the same. So you have the option. You're going to spend the same amount of budget. Are you going to deploy ad 1 or ad 2? Your budget, even as its most cost-efficient version, can only get you a specific number of impressions. So once you decide, okay, this is the best way to spend this money, there's still a finite number of impressions that you're going to get with that budget. There isn't any more budget, but we need to do more. By the infamous Guy Fieri, Yeti. I don't mean to be controversial here. No, that's just a universal challenge. And that's something that we all grapple with. And what's the answer to that? Where can we create incremental return without more budget? And that's impact. Prioritizing impact over just an impression. We just saw it with that last ad. It seemed like one of those was more impactful than the other, and they cost the same if you deploy them. So that's kind of the next strategic approach that we try and strive for with all our plans. And this is not a creative presentation. I am more so in the media realm than the creative realm, but they all have to integrate together, and impact should be considered through each part of a communications plan. So the consumer journey, where can you be impactful? With the market and the target audience. The media mix, what's going to be more impactful? The message, the creative, the integration of it all. Impact should be a theme throughout each part of this process, and we'll dive into that. But despite not being a creative presentation, it's easier to show with ads given this format. So let's do one more. Okay, which ad did you notice? Chicken? All right, here's the two ads. Raise your hand if you notice number one more than number two. Raise your hand if you notice number two more than number one. All right, same thing. So we have like 2 versus, I can't estimate, like 12. So again, these ads cost the same. And here we go. So the point is you need to stand out, and you can do that through impact. And that's really where you're going to find that margin of, hey, that's more impactful. But also, creative is subjective. So that's okay that we're not 100% on this. But what we're thinking about it is more from a media consumption standpoint. Some days we see more hours of media than hours we are awake, which is crazy. How does that even work? Well, because we're also multitasking now. We're on a screen for most of the day, and then sometimes we're on a screen in front of the screen, or sometimes we're on our work laptop and we're also looking at our cell phone. We can't really escape it. And just to put a stat to it, for 2022 from eMarketer, that's an average of 13 hours with media a day. The average person sleeps 8 hours a day, 24 hours, so that's 13 hours out of 16 hours a day. That's a lot of time. So I think we've heard it throughout each seminar is that it gets pretty crowded out there. Let's do another example. Person orders lunch from a fast food chain. Our trusty targeting algorithm is back, and it says, oh, look, a fast food contender. Guy then goes back online after enjoying his food and goes back maybe browsing social media, and boom, there it is, everywhere. Now all he's getting is a fast food ad. You guys have seen it before. You go and you visit a site, and boom, 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 everywhere you go after that, and you're like, I already bought it, or I'm not interested anymore. And sometimes it can be so overwhelming. And then how is your ad going to cut through that noise, that competitive market? And we're in Boston, so it's wicked crowded out there, net. And then another takeaway from this is your competitors are using your same targeting. You go into a Facebook platform and you know who you want to target, and likely those targets are the same ones that your competitors are using because those are the options and they make sense. So how are you standing out? Now, an attributable results-focused solution would say, trust the algorithm. Keep your audience broad. The algorithm will do the work for you. Mind you, I'm speaking more about prospecting media. So we're trying to go out and find consumers before they're coming to us. So yes, this is true. The algorithm will find your target audience, but it will for all your competitors too that are using these same target audiences. And in a saturated marketplace in heightening the CPM rates. An impact-driven solution would say create space to drive impact. Don't just deliver impressions, but create space to really try and drive impact. Can you prioritize a geo-target that's more specific and relevant to your business than your competitors? You're taking yourself out of the competitive and saturated marketplace, and you're speaking to them in a more impactful way. And maybe that might be less cluttered, or you have more budget to do so you can take up a higher share of voice. Or can you research learnings? You can use research and learnings to find a less obvious targeting approach that will still reach your target consumer. Maybe you found out that your target consumer skews, sports interests. And so you say, okay, there's so much overlap in these audiences, I'm going to target sports interests so that way when they're getting all these sports ads, mine's going to be the one that stands out as something different. And it's a really unique way of looking at things, but in the world that we're going into with less attributable results, it's okay to think outside the box. You want to be able to cut through the noise. The algorithm is using the same targeting for your competitors and delivering it. How do we create impact in a saturated marketplace? So you don't get wallpapered. Don't be afraid to try something new. We are humans, marketing to humans, and the goal is to make a connection. And we've seen that also with Tom's presentation and the emotion and the human connection. And that goes for prospecting, not just content as well. So another example, I think. Oh, impact gets lost as the intangible. It's not concrete. It's not easy to just check off your to-do list. It's something that really has to be a thoughtful pillar in your strategy and thinking about it each step of the way. Because to increase results with the same amount of money, you have to prioritize impact. So here's 9Rooftops' typical structure to come up with a plan, and I'm sure it's very familiar to any of you doing marketing plans or media plans. But you discover, define, design, deliver, and measure and optimize. So with that, what's a checklist that you can check yourself against to say, okay, did I think this through, the impact through each step of the process? What's the consumer journey and where can I realistically interject? So for our first example, when Andy/Stu was going to Vegas, that ad populated while he was already searching, and it was a prospecting ad. So that was probably not, it wasn't interjected at the right time for that circumstance. Where can we make more impact and interject to drive incrementality? Impact and incrementality. Focus the problem, define where's the tension. Speak to it. That Wingstop ad with the I don't want to botch it. Look at our thighs. So that was speaking through the tension because that was during the chicken wing shortage. And they switched to chicken thighs. And then they addressed it in a really humorous and impactful way. And they delivered it in a way that made sense for the platform, which we'll also get into. Create solutions for the design. Insert the brand in a noticeable way. So I know we just talked about it one way with Wingstop, but another way, and it doesn't have to be creative focus, is, for example, your reach and your budget. If you're only going to reach somebody once with maybe like a banner ad, a web banner ad, save your money. You need to be noticeable, and then there's frequency that goes with each type of tactic. So rather than just being a drop in the bucket, think about your marketing strategy. Do a couple things, do it well to be noticeable, rather than spreading yourself too thin to the point where, again, you might be getting wallpapered. Make it real and deliver. This is a big one. Tailoring the content per channel and making it loud. We just saw how fast those social media ads went. You have to tailor your content to the channel to make it impactful. And there's a couple more examples if anybody has questions on that. Finally, measure and optimize. So that's the part where it's really looking for incrementality. We'll go through some of the measurement side of all these recommendations, but signs of incrementality will show you that you are making an impact. Because if people are watching your videos, that's better than if they're not watching your videos. So look at things like video completion rate, the sales lifts, anything that shows signs of incrementality. And then that brings us to kind of the third pillar. So impact and incrementality is really what we want to focus on, especially in this evolving landscape, and connecting the dots of allowing you to do this and not feeling like you're kind of abandoning how you've been reporting on marketing or anything like that. So marketers and brands have a common challenge. Basically, we touch so many departments, and there's so many departments even within marketing. You have basically all these communication departments. You have PR, you have your social team, you have organic SEO, SEM, or some of you might be doing most of this on your own. But what happens is that you're also connected to a lot of other departments like operations, and you're dealing with different product teams, and you also have to think about sales. So how do you basically become impactful and learn from each other cross-departmentally? Because that will allow you to implement some of these learnings and be helpful to other departments as well. Because, like I said before, marketing can only influence a business so much, but if you use that as a reason to not integrate or be correlated with other business results, what's the point? There's really no point of marketing unless it's driving incremental return of what wouldn't be there, I always get this one mixed up. What wouldn't be there if you hadn't done it? Anyway, there's no quick fix, but a best practice approach. And I wish it could be like a simple thing. This isn't really a simple, implement this, implement that, but it's more of a framework that will help you think about this for your own business. It's strategizing and optimizing to impact incrementality, like we talked about. And it requires integration, communication, and an integrated measurement strategy. So there's 3 tiers to this. Campaign metrics, brand health metrics, and commercial metrics. Put those all together, and that'll be an integrated measurement plan with holistic results. So let's go through the different tiers. Campaign performance metrics, those we should be familiar with as marketers. Those are going to be the results that we get. They might include our media results, our website results, our consumer engagement KPIs. They might be our CPMs, percent reach, leads, click-through rate, and attributable results sit here. Those are campaign metrics. Those are not commercial metrics. So despite being maybe sales-oriented or conversion-oriented, what you're seeing at the campaign level is attributable results to your media, not commercial metrics. So the role of these metrics are really ongoing optimizations and channel-specific insights. So if you're seeing that you're getting a better video completion rate for certain ads, or if you're seeing that YouTube is performing better for you than online pre-roll, programmatic pre-roll, or something like that, you can discern those things, and you can discern them in real time, which is really helpful for making optimizations throughout the campaign. But then brand health metrics have a little bit longer lead time. So that's going to be consumer attitudes, brand perceptions, brand health. Those should all be taken into account, because as you burn through these campaigns, that's what you're also striving for, is what's the brand health. Search lift and sentiment are 2 examples of these KPIs. So just overall brand search lift, how's that doing? That maybe not be specific to the tactics that you're looking at, but that's more of a macro brand health metric you could look at. Or something like surveys, quarterly, monthly surveys of brand sentiment. Those are some examples. And this tells us how consumers are reacting to the brand. And then finally, the commercial metrics that you should not shy away from analyzing your metrics with. So that's sales, revenue, EBITDA. Incremental ROI. If it's not incremental, it's not really a return. And then this guy's macro strategy to investment. So all that to say, So this is what a holistic measurement framework would look like, and thinking about how can you get all these in one place with the same people to discuss the results holistically, or how can you streamline them so you're actually sharing results as they come in. If you only care about the key performance indicator, you could be missing the big picture. So another example on that, let's go back to the old Vegas ad, and we decide to toss up a new Vegas ad. And we're gonna see, okay, we're gonna check in on the campaign, we're gonna see which one's performing, and then we're gonna make some optimizations. So we're looking at the results, we're looking at the optimizations. Our primary KPI is cost per attributable visitor. So, all right, it looks like the new ad has a $330 cost per attributable visitor. And the old ad has a $300 cost per attributable visitor. Based on that, we would stop the old ad, and we would stop the new ad, and we keep the old ad going. However, if we look at the whole picture, we might see the new ad has only been in market for a portion of the time as the old ad, and already has racked up 300 comments. And we read the comments, the sentiment is good, it's showing buzz. Keep that ad in market, because you can see the impact, the incremental impact it's driving. It's not getting wallpapered, maybe like the old ad. The old ad might be showing signs of fatigue. And then this new Vegas ad might run itself a little longer and actually drop down in the cost per visitor. And you wouldn't have given it a chance unless you're looking at the whole picture. So really don't leave metrics unturned. Again, it's a little bit more time, but it's gonna really optimize your results to give you a holistic picture of your marketing and really feel good about it, because you can see the incrementality in it. rather than, just trusting the KPI. So look at all the campaign metrics when we're looking at the bottom of that pyramid, the campaign metrics. For example, delivery metrics. So one example of that metric might be reach. And if you're monitoring reach for the past couple of years, you might have noticed advertising costs are up. And if you have the same budget year over year over year, your reach is probably down. You're actually probably reaching less people with the same budget than 2 years ago. So those are just examples of why you want to keep a pulse on these types of things. And what % of your audience size did you reach? If you're changing tactics and things like that, there's different costs to different tactics because they probably have different impact levels, et cetera. But you want to assess, the reach isn't something that you can necessarily change, but it's something that you should still monitor. Engagement metrics, engagement rate. Was your message, ad, or tactic impactful? What performed well, what didn't, and what's the action that comes out of that? So once you figure out if it performed or not, put it in a log, actually make the optimization in the system. Don't just look at the primary KPI. Attributable results, cost per sale, for example. Are we seeing attributable results at all? That's actually a good way to compare tactics, although I will say that some tactics are more easily attributable than others. But just, the gut check of, okay, I am getting it. You're not going to throw away attributable results by any means. They still mean something, but they mean just as much as everything else that we're talking about. Is one message or ad execution seeing more? So that's really helpful for monitoring creative. And then what you might see is attributable results or like cost per sale might have increased exponentially because we're seeing less in the data because of all these privacy changes. But that doesn't mean that, you shouldn't look at it anymore. You should use that number still and compare ads. Oh, this ad's driving more, et cetera, et cetera. So it's really a holistic approach. Finally, I wanted to add brand lift metrics. So that's going back to the beginning when we talked about incrementality. If you have any way to do some of these studies, that's a great way to assess for incrementality, and that should be looked at and bubbled up to this integrated campaign metric reporting method. So a couple do's and don'ts. Don't shy away from being correlated with real business results. That's still literally the point of marketing. Don't judge performance solely on key performance indicators. Make sure you're turning over every stone and looking at all the metrics. Don't keep marketing metrics close to your vest. Share them. Teach people how to read them. Share them across departments. Actually, a quick example of this would be if an ad's performing really well, what's the ad showing? Could that inform the product department, et cetera, et cetera? And then don't rely on attributed results as a key to success or reporting, because that's going to change, and it's already starting to. And if I just had to report on my Facebook return on ad spend, and that was the only number I could show a client, you'd be out of a job right now. So I think it's really important to make sure you're showing the holistic picture, because that will be a timeless strategy. And then for some do's, create a tangible log to track learnings on a regular cadence. So that could be weekly, and then monthly to look at more holistic, and then campaign wrap. Bring it all together and share that out with departments. Monitor more than the KPI. Look at all the campaign tactic metrics that we talked about. Do benchmark metrics ahead of the campaign for added context to performance. When you're checking on these weekly campaigns, give yourself some benchmarks. And I always say the best place to start comparing yourself is to yourself. So look at historic campaigns, because, for example, if you look up an average, click-through rate on Facebook, that's going to be based on a national level. That's going to be people who have the scale to get very hyper-targeted. And then you might be a local brand who can't do that same relevant targeting because you just don't have the scale. So you're going to have a different click-through rate, and that's okay. Try and benchmark yourself against past performance. And then share the results across departments for cross-department learning and implementation, like we talked about with the product example. And then finally, analyze these results with an additional business data and context. Bring in the brand health metrics, or set those up if you can. Look at search trends, look at the actual sales and revenue, and bring that all to the table to really make a holistic storyline of where the business is going. So to wrap this up, we do have some time for questions. Strive for incrementality in your marketing efforts, maximize for impact throughout the marketing strategy and execution, and integrate data sources and communicate cross departments to unlock full picture insights for a timeless strategy, regardless of where we are in the industry landscape. And then here's just a little picture of the attributable results focus strategy, the incrementality and impact driving strategy. Down below is privacy changes. We don't want to go down there. We're just going to leap over as bold marketers and take this challenge head on. So any questions from anyone? Oh,
Hi, Erin. Great presentation. I'm from the old school, and one of the biggest problems we've always had with marketing and advertising is the intangibility of it. And how many people I've worked with who are, box bean counter kind of guys saying, oh, we can't tell how much it's costing us. And yes, I agree with you completely on the business model, that's what you look at. You look at your sales. What I wanted to ask you is, you said earlier, don't be afraid to try new things. I completely agree with you on that. But today, we're with all the metrics that we have, we've got very demanding bosses that say, well, it's not working, it's not working. At what point do you fish or cut bait is the question. That's a hard one.
No, I think that's a really good point. And I think I've been in similar situations with some of our clients, because if something's not working, how do you know which one it is the question. So I think that's where signs of incrementality comes into, and trying to find it with every tactic, because if you're seeing that, you're not driving any traffic with your display ads, but you are seeing lots of traffic. This whole thing of like, don't optimize to clicks, optimize to results. That's totally fair. But at the same time, don't not look at the clicks. Try and find anything that shows signs of incrementality to try and like unweave that and figure out, okay, with your gut, which one would you feel most comfortable with taking out and reinvesting? And that's hard to say, because each tactic will be a different way of discerning that. But for example, I had a client once at a previous role, and I was looking at the delivery. I was looking at where the impressions were going. And I realized through the algorithm, it wasn't going where I wanted it to. And I was like, well, that makes me feel a little bit better about pulling this tactic, because it's not going to do that much when I pull it, because it's not really serving me the way I want it to. So that was almost the opposite of a sign. I didn't see incrementality because of where the spend was going. So let's reinvest that either in the right market and see their incrementality on top of that, or let's pull it all together and invest it in a new tactic. Good question, though.
Cool. Erin, I've got a question.
Okay.
So that was an awesome presentation, by the way. Really enjoyed it. Bunch of notes. Question for you. So as digital marketers over the last 10 years or so have got, pretty used to being able to measure everything, pretty used to the way the different platforms will attribute results. Have you got any tips on how to help change the mindset of moving away from an attribution type mindset to measurement to incrementality? Because it's going to be a big shift. A lot of marketers, especially myself and some of the others in the room who have probably been doing this for a long time, can probably go, well, we never used to have that anyway, so we'll just go back to how things were. But the younger marketers, potentially who've only been on the tools for 5 years, maybe even 10 years, they've never actually had to do their job without having all of these other attributable numbers to back them up.
And you get used to it, and then it's nice to have.
Yeah.
So the question is undoing it, like how.
Yeah, exactly. Any tips on helping to change their mindset to move more towards an incrementality mindset as opposed to attribution?
And I think that's it's marketers have to change their mindset, but it's also selling your bosses or your clients on that, because everybody likes a graph that goes like this. So I think, one is focusing on that bottom line. So, and some of the other metrics. So when we saw a huge increase after iOS in March 2021, and it was like a crazy increase in our cost per action, let's say. We had to get that number in front of our client, have that conversation and say, but look at this. Look what didn't change. The click-through didn't change. Your bottom line didn't change. Your engagement metrics didn't change. And we reintroduced all those metrics and say, this wasn't a performance concern. This is a measurability concern. And we need to find a way around this because it's not going backwards. And to your point, it was like this before. So we did it before. I think what's the big difference now is rather than just focusing on, reach and frequency planning, we still have a lot of other metrics that we can show for. And that's going to be those engagement metrics. Like digital media is still a fabulously measurable platform or channels. And we can use some of those to help bolster the story. But I would say put that on the forefront of saying, yes, this changed, this doesn't look as good, but maybe pair it with everything that hasn't changed or maybe has performed better and start to tell that story. And I think getting people involved in the changes and really explaining it will take them through it and help have that conversation.
Yep. And I think also, you mentioned it yourself that attributable results are lessening and they'll be more difficult to hang our hat on. So it's not going to be long until you just can't look at those numbers anyway and have that as a crux. So I guess sort of painting the picture that, hey, we're not going to have these soon anyway, so we should start to look at other ways to measure success. That's probably a good way.
Absolutely. And I think we had one question in the back too.
Hi, Erin. Appreciate it. So one of the slides that you had showed the 3 different measurement scales, sort of like that triangular approach. One with lower campaign, then brand, then commercial metrics as well. Where would you classify those metrics that go beyond just the standard campaign measurements? Like you mentioned, brand lift studies, foot traffic studies, sales impact, matchback analysis, all of these different studies that go beyond based upon what the client said, because it can fit into two, even to 3, especially with sales, because if you do like a matchback analysis or a sales impact study, it's the client providing you with the sales data attributed to the campaign itself. So how would you put those additional metrics into that triangle?
Yeah, I would say that, it depends what lift study you're looking at. Like if you're looking at a tactic specific brand lift study, that should still probably go in the campaign metrics because that's the role of those, is to look at the different tactics. And then I would say, like the search lift or something like that, that's when it probably starts to get to that second column of brand health. Because you're not able to attribute that to one thing. The last one is interesting because, to your point, it's an attributable result, but it's one-to-one. And if there wasn't anything else that exposed them in that path, then that's just great. That's both a commercial one and a campaign one, and you still get the luxury of having that attributable result and feeling confident in that. Whereas in other digital platforms, we don't have that anymore. So hang on to that because that's ideal.